Over the years, the Grammys have become notorious for many scandals, snubs, and musical history moments. These usually relate to the big four categories: Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best New Artist. Awards given out to honour the most representative albums, songs, and artists from that period in time. However, one of these awards doesn't just come with a gramophone statuette, it also has been widely rumoured to carry a curse. The Best New Artist Grammy Curse has slowly become a widespread topic that crops up every year, prompting retrospectives, endless commentary, and a consolation prize for those who may not win. But does this curse hold any reality to it? Welcome to Swiftly Spoken, a fan-made Taylor Swift podcast in which we break down her lyrics, deep dive into full album retrospectives, and theorise about what may be coming next. As always, we are your hosts, Lisa and Cameron, and this week we're going to be looking into the Best New Artist Grammy Curse, establishing the history behind it, deciphering the logical reasons many of these acts may have suffered, and speaking about some specific cases over the years. We'll of course be going over Taylor's nomination, as well as briefly going over next year's 2025 nominees. Before we get into this episode, we wanted to give a couple of disclaimers and some notes. So firstly, once again, we wanted to thank all of you for the support on our last two videos especially. We have some very exciting topics and fun ideas also lined up, so thank you so much for supporting us with those videos, and we really do hope that you subscribe if you are listening to this and you're not yet, so you don't miss out on some really other exciting projects we have coming up. We really do appreciate your support, and we love reading the comments, and we just really enjoy sharing our passion for music and especially for Taylor. So again, thank you so much. As for this episode, just as we did with our other two Curse episodes, we wanted to give a small disclaimer at the start of this one to clarify that, firstly, the Grammy Awards are not the be-all and end-all of the music industry, nor do they dictate what good music is and isn't. They are very controversial, but they are kind of lauded as quite a big award for both musical artists, fans, and also critics, so that is why we're concentrating on them for this episode. Secondly, if we do mention an artist and call them cursed, we mean absolutely no offense to that artist or their fandom. There are many different ways that popularity of an artist can be measured. If we talk about one of your favorite artists in this video as cursed, it does not mean that they're a bad artist. There is something from everyone out there, and again, we would love to hear your voice on the matter. If you are more knowledgeable on one of these artists or you're deep within their fandom and we do call them cursed, then please go ahead and give us your perspective in the comments below.
Before we get into this episode, we want to mention two of our previous musical theories / curse videos that basically analyse other musical curses / theories that affected Taylor's career and other artists' career. And these two episodes are the fourth album curse and the sophomore slump. So if you're interested in general musical theories and other kind of musical curses per se, then make sure you check out those episodes. However, relating those supposed musical curses to the Best New Artist Curse, it seems that this curse seems to be quite different, as it appears to be a very widespread and kind of widely commented on by not just fans but also news outlets. Nevertheless, as we kind of go on to discuss, it does become clear that the Best New Artist Curse is very much deeply related to the sophomore slump curse. As we said, many articles on it, so this is more than just kind of a fan theory, and it's definitely kind of become one of the most mainstream musical curses and crops up every single year that the Grammys roll around. There's all sorts of people trying to debunk it, speculate if it's true, if it's finally over, and I guess that's kind of what we're going to be doing as well. So before we jump into it, it's best to kind of actually say what is the Best New Artist Grammy Award before we get into what the curse is. So this award has a lot of rules around it. It's quite complex with lots of different nuances. So referring to the Grammys website is the best place to kind of understand what the Best New Artist Award is. And they say that our Best New Artist category probably has one of the most complicated set of rules of any of our categories. Essentially, a new artist is defined for the Grammy process as any performing artist or established performing group who releases during the eligible year the recording that first establishes the public identity of that artist or established group as a performer. A Grammy nomination in a performance category in a prior year disqualifies an artist from competing in this category unless the nomination came from a single or guest spot on another artist's recording and the artist hasn't yet released a full album. Basically, to cut down that kind of quite official wording, it's basically it awards an artist that have kind of managed to break into the mainstream / kind of public identity within that eligible year. So it doesn't matter how many albums they they've released or how long they've been an artist, as long as they haven't been previously nominated and recognised by the Grammys for some of their previous work. So obviously we'll get into it when we talk through the 2025 nominations, but people like Sabrina Carpenter, she's been, on the music scene for 10 years, so it's quite weird that she's deemed a new artist when she's on like album 5, 6, but because obviously Short and Sweet and things with Espresso and Please Please Please, she's broken into the mainstream, and this is her kind of first Grammy nominations, therefore she is deemed a new artist by the Grammys.
It's a very interesting set of rules. Like you said, it's like one of the most complicated and complex because it means that some artists have unfortunately been left out, like Lady Gaga, because she was already like given a nod for Just Dance, though it didn't win, but then she didn't go on to be nominated for Best New Artist. But then in other cases, which we're going to see as we discuss some of these examples, artists that have been around for like a decade plus, and then they get nominated when they have broken into the mainstream suddenly. So yeah, it's very interesting because is that really a new artist, or when does that kind of eligibility end and when does you just having a big break begin? I don't know, it's a complex one, so there's a lot of debate about that topic as well.
Yeah, no, it is. It's weird because even people like Ed Sheeran was kind of previously nominated in like songwriting categories, and then obviously then was up for Best New Artist, and there was a lot of debate even at that time, like, is he a new artist? And Sabrina is kind of this year's one that's like, is she really new? But in terms of like public conscience and in terms of even Grammy awareness,
yes,
she is new to them because, this is the first time they're kind of recognising any of her projects, and is also the first time that a lot of the general public are aware of her.
So now that we know what the Best New Artist Grammy actually is, what is the Best New Artist Curse? Well, supposedly winning the award for Best New Artist is considered by a lot of people to be a curse, because a lot of artists that have been given this prize have not been really able to repeat the success they achieved in the year of their debut, or in the year, rather, that they were up for this award. As we will see, in some cases, they see a decline in their career. They don't get new nominations, or maybe even have tragic ends. As an indication of absolutely how widely known this curse has become, it even appears mentioned on the actual Wikipedia page for Grammy Best New Artist, suggesting that it's something that many consider to be like a fact that is very much attached to this award rather than just folklore, or at least a superstition that has breached the confines of fandom spaces like the fourth album curse or even the sophomore slump. On Wikipedia, it basically says that the Best New Artist award has a reputation for being given to artists whose music industry success ends up being short-lived. It is sometimes asserted with varying degrees of sincerity that the award itself brings a curse. The article then goes on to mention one winner of the Best New Artist Grammy who overtly discusses the curse, and this one in specific is a quote that is mentioned in almost all of the articles and all of the videos that talks about the Best New Artist Curse. So I think really they brought it up and they brought it to the forefront of everyone's minds when they think of this award. A former member of style and vocal band who won the Grammy for Best New Artist in 1977 in an interview for VH1's 100 Greatest One-Hit Wonders said that they won 2 of the 5 Grammys that they were up for, and one of them was the Best New Artist Grammy. And then they kind of concluded that that was the kiss of death for them, and that they feel sorry for everyone else who's gotten this award since, because it came with a curse. That is what is being
Which is a
alluded
bit rough,
to.
isn't it? That's a bit, it has a bit of a kind of bite to it, doesn't it? Like, it was a kiss of death and I feel sorry. You know what I mean? It's almost a bit like, yeah, that ruined our career.
Well, if we look into it...
And also, even being interviewed for the 100
exactly
Wonders is also a bit embarrassing as well.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to point out. If you look into it, just in that quote itself, like where it's being given is very telling of what happened to the band, right? So they're basically known for Afternoon Delight. That song was a US #1. It was like a hit that was everywhere, but unfortunately after that they were unable to match their previous success. The band eventually broke up in 1981, and the members of the band who were like together, they like all divorced. They've remained friendly, but it kind of all broke down, shall we say. It didn't end up very good for that band, both in like public lives, private lives, and like the career of them musically. So I understand why this quote was given. It makes sense because it did kind of end in burning flames for them.
Which is also interesting is this is so early on into the Grammys.
Exactly.
Like, this is not the last 5 years. This is literally almost like from the creation of the Grammy Awards that a band has come out and said we were cursed. So, if it's kind of from like almost the get-go that this is a thing, no wonder that this has kind of become a known public curse. You know what I mean? It's known in like the musical conscience of this supposedly exists because it's been around almost as long as the Grammys have. This is not kind of a last 5 minutes that someone's come up with this idea on YouTube and it's kind of gone a bit viral in a couple of fan bases. This has been a thing since a long old time.
Exactly, and that's it. They're not only the prime example of the curse, they acknowledge it, and also because of that, I think that it does establish it as like being a thing, which we'll go on to talk about some really important examples and why I think this is kind of like snowballed into becoming very well known in fandoms, but also more than that. But I completely agree with you. Right from the get-go, it seems that people kind of felt that, like they said, it's a kiss of death, and after that things go a bit awry for these artists, unfortunately.
So yeah, as we were saying, this award has been around since the 1960s, so there's over 60 plus years of artists that have been nominated and won, and with all these artists there's obviously kind of varying success. But before we go on to talk about some specific cases, we first want to explore the kind of logical explanation behind the superstition.
As for the reasonings, firstly relating directly to the sophomore slump curse, which we alluded to previously, the reasonings behind the Grammy curse has little to do with actually winning the award. Rather, it's the pressure being put onto normally young artists to keep up the level of success that they have suddenly seen thrust upon them. So when you are suddenly recognized by the whole world and your debut album, or like the peak of your albums, is when you're so young and at the beginning of your career, there's so much pressure built up on you to continue with that outpour of amazing levels of music and stay in the public eye. It's a lot of pressure. It's just a lot to live up to. You've established this, you've set the bar so high for yourself that anything will pale in comparison. And this is something that we directly spoke about in the sophomore slump curse. Relating to that, these artists sometimes have a long time to prepare for the album that makes them well known. Sometimes, like Cameron mentioned, this isn't their debut album. This is an album that has just got a lot of has made them well known in the public eye. However, they've built up a lot of trajectory before that, so they've had a lot of time to practice and get it perfect before.
Yeah, they've kind of honed their craft.
Exactly.
Got really good songwriters and producers involved, maybe a little bit older and more aware of the music industry, and also because maybe, they've been around for 10 years and haven't reached supposed mainstream massive success, that they're just making art, and because of that, they actually make really decent art. And then it kind of propels them into the mainstream. And
the follow-up to that is so much harder, because where do you go from there? A lot of one-hit wonders, as they're called, do feel so much pressure that they end up like crashing out and like fizzling away because of the pressure that is applied upon them. While this might be their peak in terms of career and relevancy, some artists are just simply products of a song going viral or being a staple of pop culture at that time. That doesn't guarantee relevancy on its own. Sometimes there can be a really, really big song in 1 year, and then that artist then kind of like disappears. Maybe they have then their own little fandom and their own little niche, which is absolutely perfect and fine. That doesn't make them less of an artist. It's just that they might shy away from the mainstream pop culture. A massive standard basically has been set that you have to live up to, and for many, anything pales in comparison. But in reality, all of this is quite normal. Every artist has ebbs and flows in their career. Finally, another reason might be to do with bad choices made by the Grammy voters, who can't always predict the future of the music industry, and they can't predict the longevity or the legacy that these artists may be able to uphold. Now we're going to get into the examples of some artists that suffered from the curse. We're going to be going over a few of them from before the 2000s that are very clear contenders of those who have suffered, because it's best to look at these people's careers with a little bit of distance. However, we won't be going into detail one by one because there's a lot of nuance to be explored, and context is so very important, and we haven't simply got the time or expertise to go over them one by one. However, to see more, we do recommend you check out Crash Thompson on YouTube, who has analysed the winners year by year with a lot of expertise and a lot of research gone into it from 1990 to 2004, and has plans to continue on with the series. Other videos from Pop Dissected and Naomi Cannibal are also amazing, and they look over some of the more current winners from the 90s onwards. Whether you consider these people to be cursed really depends on how you judge what success is. So I think that some of our choices might differ from the choices of the people that we've spoken about in the videos that we've recommended, because it is a little bit subjective in the end. So make sure, as we said, you weigh in on any of the recipients that you think were cursed or not and completely broke the trend, and that we might disagree with, because it is, again, it depends on how you judge what you think the curse actually entails. Like, does it mean like you disappear from pop music? Does it mean that you disappear from the mainstream? Does it mean you fade away but have your own niche of fans? Does it mean that something terrible has to happen? Like, what is it for you?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is for artists it can mean different things, because for some artists the success might be that they've been able to carve out a really, really solid fan base that, you know, show up when albums are released, show up when tours are announced. They have, you know, these actually quite successful tours that sell out, and they've got a really kind of strong relationship with their fan base and a really kind of healthy relationship. But maybe they haven't had that kind of mainstream success that they once did. A great example of that is someone like Carly Rae Jepsen. She has a very, very ride or die fan base, very, very solid fan base.
Right.
But, you know, hasn't really been able to kind of match the success of things like Call Me Maybe. And like lots of people might look at her career as a little bit of a failure, but I think actually when you look at her career, it's been very successful. She's put out kind of pop records that have been, and obviously she wasn't nominated for, didn't win obviously for Best New Artist, but she's just a good example of like how you view success.
Yeah.
And, you know, she's got albums that are kind of amongst the pop world, recognised as really, really solid pop albums, and as I said, has very successful album releases and fans and career. So, you know, it's hard, isn't it, to really judge, because yes, if you judge awards, chart success, technically yes, she isn't been as successful, but, you know, she's still putting out decent art that people are still loving. And I guess, you know, as an artist, it depends what you value and whether you value that more over winning a couple more Grammys.
Exactly. It really depends on the context of everything, of the artist, of the awards, of how you judge success. We're going to be looking into a few different things like chart success, Grammy success after winning that first one, and in general, did they become a mainstay of pop culture? However, again, we don't mean to be disrespectful to any of these artists. We will just kind of like look over it, give our opinions, but again, context does very much matter. After looking over some of the main examples of those that clearly suffered, we're going to be deep diving more into the 2000 onwards period of this award. So this is our generation of music after all, and we have much more familiarity with it. These are artists that, in all fairness, by now should have built a defining legacy, or at least still be relevant in our music landscape today. So we're going to be weighing in on how these artists have fared over time. So as we said, let's get into the examples from pre-2000s of those who clearly suffered the curse and made the curse infamous. So firstly, again, we got to mention the Starlin Vocal Band in 1976, who kind of like set the standard for this curse. They spoke about it outright and it became a thing because of those quotes. I really do think so. So we've already seen how they suffered. Basically, the band absolutely broke apart and they were never really heard from again as a band. So sadly, that kind of sets the standard, and I understand why people would see that and say, oh God, this is cursed. Another example from the decade after that, in the 80s, was Christopher Cross, who, this one is an interesting one, and I think it's interesting to bring it up because it just shows that sometimes winning a lot of Grammys for the first couple of years in your career doesn't guarantee longevity in the long run, which is interesting. So in the case of Christopher Cross, they at that time accomplished the unprecedented feat of sweeping all 4 of the top categories at the 1981 ceremony. So that is really, really impressive. And after that, they did have a couple more years of success in the charts, and also again for an Oscar for an original song. But after a few years, by the mid-80s, that was pretty much it. It's sad to see, they had a lot of success initially, and after that, it was kind of like a slow fading away. Of course, they obviously continued on with their career, and I'm sure they did pretty well after that, but when you have such a amazing debut, anything pales in comparison, it really does. This is an interesting case to bring up because both Adele and Billie Eilish kind of follow a similar suit. However, both of them are doing pretty well after that from what we've seen. But unfortunately, Cross was never able to have more success as he did with his first instances of the Best New Grammy Awards, etc. This third example is from the 90s now. So we've had big examples from the 70s, 80s, and now the 90s, which really cements this curse in people's minds, I think. And this is Milli Vanilli, whose award was rescinded. This is the only time that a Grammy has been taken away from someone actively, and it's in this category. So that's why, again, this really adds to the curse and the superstition of it all. Unfortunately, it was discovered that both of the singers that formed Milli Vanilli back in the day hadn't recorded any of the songs. They were doing playback on stage and were lending their image for the album art and the rest of it, but they did not sing a single word on that album. So unfortunately, their Grammy was withdrawn, and again, this really contributes to the terrible reputation that the Best New Artist Award has.
God, that's awful. I never knew that. I didn't know that was a thing. That's, kind of, God, like, it's almost like being scammed. They almost scammed the Grammys, you know? Like, that's crazy.
In a way.
Like you said, it kind of adds to the idea that this kind of award is just like a bit of a joke and a bit of a farce, really.
Right, this is it. So all of those three examples, I think, really like add it all together. The first one being like someone who outward admits like this was the beginning of the end. Another one who had such like a peak and then like dropped off. And then finally this one, which like you said is just like kind of a bit of a scam, really. And it all came out like, it was such a big scandal when it all came out. It came out because of like things within the band, and it was like a whole thing. So it was really big, and it was really sad to see something like this happen. It was also tragic because they did try and make it on their own afterward. Both of them, the people who had sung originally on the album, then went on to like produce an album under like, as like the real Milli Vanilli.
Yeah.
But also on the other side, the two guys who were lending their images as Milli Vanilli at that point, who hadn't sung at all, also tried to make it on their own, but not to much success. And unfortunately, one of them sadly passed away a few years later. So it was just like a terrible time all around, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, another artist that comes up within this kind of period is Mariah Carey, who basically, after her initial wins, she did not receive any other Grammys for another 16 years. She's been nominated a lot, did not win. I think Mariah Carey is an interesting one because Mariah Carey is like a massive staple within pop culture and has had a lot of success across her kind of albums, and you know, like natural artist careers, her career has kind of ebbed and flowed, as you kind of said earlier, with that's just very normal. But I think now that she's kind of become like the Queen of Christmas, like can't avoid her, she has established herself and is very well known. I think it would be hard to kind of describe her as an artist that was cursed. I think her career is just very different because she's kind of now moved in. Her career now is kind of moved into the Christmas world, and realistically, you know, as an artist, if you want longevity, have a Christmas song because you are played every year. You know, they roll you back out in November and you have, you know, make millions at the end of the year and then live off it for the rest of the year. So she's definitely doing all right. I wouldn't really describe her as cursed, would you?
No, not at all. Not really. Like, how could you? I think it's just because of that. Some people argue the fact that after those initial wins in 1991, she did not receive anything for 16 years, which is so long. Like, it's almost 2 decades of completely new people. And it wasn't until the emancipation of Mimi that she actually was nominated and won, because she was nominated during those 16 years. But can you imagine turning up for 16 years with loads of nominations and not getting anything? 16 years. And then finally...
Yeah, no, that's a long old time.
Finally, she did win again. But like you said, nowadays, obviously, it's very hard to say that she was cursed when literally she is synonymous with a particular time of year. And, you know, everyone knows Mariah Carey. Everyone knows a few of her songs. Like, you know, she is a staple of pop culture at this point.
Another artist in the 90s is Leanne Rimes, who won in 1997, and she obviously won the Grammy Award for Breakthrough Artist of the Year at 14, so she became the youngest music artist to ever win a Grammy. And lots of people kind of argued, was she cursed? And the kind of popular consensus is that yes, basically after her Grammy win, Leanne Rimes' albums continued to perform pretty well, but she didn't really have the major hit success that she had with Can't Fight the Moonlight in the year 2000, and she never really was able to reach heights of her kind of musical success during the like 90s, very, very early 2000s, and unfortunately had a bit of a troubled career and life. But I think with her, maybe age is a massive factor. Like 14 years old is like you know what I mean?
It's a baby. That's young. A baby.
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting because people like Sabrina, that's the age that she started her career as well, as like a 13-year-old. And then look at now she's kind of been able to reach that level of success, and I think that's really tough to kind of maintain that level at 14. I think very few artists have. People like Miley Cyrus are a very rare example of being able to make music at like, you know, a child and still have a very successful career through your teens and adulthood. So I think hers is a very interesting one, but unfortunately does seem to kind of fall into the curse category.
Yeah, unfortunately she did have a very troubled both career musically and life because of a lot of things that were going on behind the scenes because she was so young. And we see this a lot with so many young artists that are basically being taken
manipulated.
Yeah, they're being taken advantage of. So yeah, a lot of legal battles with her own parents and things like that. I think she's doing much better nowadays. Yeah.
And again, I think she's probably been able to, because I do see her name kind of
yeah
there, and she's on tour and stuff, and I think she's probably again been able to kind of carve out quite a solid fan base.
Sure.
And yeah, it's probably has in her eyes quite a successful career, and probably a lot more fruitful and healthy, hopefully, career. So now we're going to move into obviously the last 2 decades of the Best New Artist winners and kind of go through them year by year, obviously say who the winner was, discuss basically some things that suggest if they were cursed or not, and kind of give our opinions. So starting off with the year 2000, the winner was Christina Aguilera, and after obviously Genie in a Bottle, her career skyrocketed. She was nominated another 21 times since her win for Best New Artist, and has won 5 Grammys in total. She has also won a Latin Grammy in the year 2022, and she's obviously still very relevant. She has a role on The Voice. She's recently had a Vegas residency. I don't think her career has she's been able to maintain this kind of a continual mainstream success, but I think she's still been able to maintain a pretty healthy career with kind of numerous hits, and I think now is kind of living off that kind of back catalogue of very solid hits. What do you think about Christina? I wouldn't personally describe her as cursed.
Completely agree with you. We can't describe her as cursed just because she is a household name. People recognise her image. People recognise her songs. You can play a few of her songs and people will know who she is and they will be able to sing along. More than that, we've seen that, she's had a lot of Grammy success over the years. She's quite relevant. She's had film roles. She's had Vegas residencies. She's had a bit of everything. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Not cursed. For 2001, the winner was Shelby Lynne. Now, Shelby Lynne actually debuted in 1989 and slowly transitioned from country to pop, which, reminds us of Taylor in a little way.
Yes.
And she didn't break through until the very, very late 90s. But this is the typical case of having a whole life behind you and lots of experience before you actually break through and make it and are rewarded as the Best New Artist. Unfortunately, she did not go on to win any other Grammys or any other notable awards after 2001. She has gone on to release many studio albums. However, she has found her audience and her sound, but has not had mainstream success after the fact and has kind of like fell out of the limelight, but again has seemed to have found her niche, so at least that's good. Because of this, in a way, and because I'm sure that unfortunately a lot of people, if you did say, do you know Shelby Lynne, I don't think they'd be like, oh my god, yeah, I remember Shelby Lynne.
Yeah, no, unfortunately I've never heard of her, and I think that's quite sad really, that the year you win Best New Artist, you never really win anything ever again, even just, other major awards. So yeah, unfortunately I think she was kind of fell into the
cursed category. Yeah.
category.
Sadly, I have to agree.
The next year is obviously 2002, and the winner was Alicia Keys. Obviously, she's gone on to be nominated for many, many, many Grammys and has had a very stable career and obviously become a household name. A decade later, she's still producing #1 hits, introducing her to many new generations, and has been honoured many a time for the longevity of her career. And I think that it would be hard to describe Alicia Keys as cursed, because it's quite the opposite. She's got quite a healthy career with a very healthy back catalogue of hits, regularly tours. Again, might not maybe be kind of in the mainstream currently, but she's still very, very well known, a very recognised household name, and it would be very, very hard, unlike someone like Shelby Lee, to class her as cursed when, similarly to Christina Aguilera, has had a very healthy career since her win.
Yeah, this is it.
Not cursed? What about you?
Not cursed, no. She's very recognisable. She crops up at all of these amazing award shows because she's still producing amazing stuff. She's even up for a Grammy in 2025 for Hell's Kitchen, Best Musical Theatre Album. So there you go. She's exploring different genres.
Which is an interesting one.
Yeah, she's out here. She's talented in many different films, so can't argue with that. No curse, I don't think. Next up for 2003, we have Norah Jones. She won 5 Grammys that year, including Album and Record of the Year for Come Away With Me and Don't Know Why. She went on to win another Record of the Year after this, but much like Shelby Lynne, she has a very solid fan base, but never really seemed to be in the mainstream limelight again. She still releases music now that charts pretty well, but unfortunately, again, I don't think that she turned into like a household name. And if we compare her to a couple of her nominees from that year, we have Avril Lavigne and John Mayer there. So that's also an interesting thing to do every now and then. Compare like the trajectory of those names as well.
You can't kind of compare them when, Avril Lavigne obviously had and still has a very successful career, and similarly with John Mayer has carved out his kind of own career. So I think unfortunately she maybe fell into the curse category. Okay, next is obviously 2004, and the winner was Evanescence, and obviously we all know them for their song Bring Me to Life. Even though obviously they had massive success with that song and the album that song belonged to, they haven't really had any other massive hits since, and there seems to be that not long after this there was a lot of kind of tension between the members and a lot of problems within the band. They eventually did go on a hiatus for a few years, however did return, but I think even though again they've carved out probably a very, very cult and loyal fan base, unfortunately in terms of the mainstream, I don't think they were able to really replicate the success that they had with Bring Me to Life, and I think I would categorise them in the Curse category.
I agree, simply because of all of like the problems going on within the band, like breaking up, going on hiatus. Some band members didn't even turn up for the Grammys that year because there was a lot going on. So I think because of that, a bit of a curse from the start. And it's just a shame that they weren't able to maintain that level. But yeah, I agree. Next up in 2005, we have Maroon 5. They've had a very stable career and have produced radio-friendly music over the last almost 20 years, it has to be said. From 2005 throughout the 2010s and even now in the 2020s, they've had a lot of hits and have gone on headlining tours. So honestly, I think just because of how recognizable they are, maybe not as like an extremely like, shall we say, snobbish kind of musical sphere, but yes, definitely
maybe more in, like you said, a kind of radio-friendly way. But yes, they've still had a successful career, whether it be a very artistic career or a little bit more of a kind of pop-friendly radio career.
But I definitely think we can't say that they're cursed. They've produced a lot of music that a lot of people will recognise just for being played everywhere and anywhere, like Retail Workers' Nightmares.
2005.
Yeah.
Like, since then...
They've only grown,
Yeah, exactly. Their biggest hits were, 10 years later.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So next, in 2006, the winner was John Legend, and he actually is the first black man to ever achieve EGOT status, which is obviously Emmy, Grammy, Oscar and Tony, and he did that in 2018. Obviously very successful career, very talented in all sorts of musical spheres. It would be just, idiocy to class him as cursed. So quite the opposite, obviously, very successful career.
And that year was extremely tight competition as well, because you had Sierra, Fall Out Boy, Keen and Sugarland, who in 2006 were all like at their peaks and were doing really well as well. So for John Legend to win, and not only win, but then go on in 2018 to achieve the EGOT status, that already goes to show the longevity of this man's career.
Of his career, yeah exactly.
So yeah, no way was he cursed. Next up, we have Carrie Underwood in 2007, who also won in the Best Female Country Vocal Performance category for Jesus Take the Wheel. Honestly, she is a staple in country music, and at every country award show that you watch, she will be up for awards.
They pull her out. Yeah, Carrie Underwood is like on a revolving door. They love her.
That's it. She will appear, she will come out, she will win something, and she will go home.
She hosts them. Yeah. No, you cannot deny the massive success that Carrie Underwood has had. Sold mental amount of records. She is like country's golden girl. They absolutely love her. So again, maybe not the mainstream and maybe not on international field.
Yeah, this is
definitely in the States.
This one is a hard one, really, because I would say not cursed because of how big she is, but that is quite a good point you made there, where perhaps it is kind of a niche, but because we're getting closer to our era of music where we were really like involved in all of these people's careers, number one, maybe we recognize them more anyway. So that gives us kind of like a bit of a perspective of thinking that they're not cursed. And number two, country is also a genre that we have a bit of more knowledge in than some other genres. So
yes,
but I would say that she wasn't cursed just because of how well she's still doing.
So next is obviously 2008, and the winner was Amy Winehouse, and this was obviously the year that Taylor was nominated. So before we get into Taylor, we'll kind of quickly chat about Amy. Obviously, she won Record and Song of the Year in the same night. She had 8 nominations, 6 wins, and there's that very, very iconic kind of video of her when she does win some of the awards where she's like in total disbelief and shock. Unfortunately, Amy obviously had a very tragic life story due to kind of substance abuse, and we don't want to trivialise her passing at all. Her legacy is very, very strong. I myself am a massive Amy Winehouse fan, and you cannot deny the quality of her music. Just those 2 kind of albums, Frank and Back to Black, are just like staples in pop music and, the music industry. And she was very, very successful. But obviously what is interesting is this was the year that Taylor was up for the award, and I think what would have been interesting is what would have happened if Taylor had won. Obviously, if she had won and had the career that she has now, she would obviously be a massive, massive success. But would this win potentially have changed Taylor's career? do you think that maybe it would have kind of propelled her into the published conscience slightly earlier?
A bit too early,
this
maybe.
Was very much, potentially, because this was at the start of 2008. Love Story was not yet released.
No.
She was, kind of embarking on the kind of Fearless rollout, but was still very much in the kind of debut era, was still pushing out, Should Have Said No. So it's interesting what could have potentially happened and how this might potentially change the trajectory of Taylor's career. Do you think it would have, or do you think she'd still have had the success?
I don't know. It's an interesting thing to reflect upon because it's difficult to say. In general, that year for the Best New Artist award, we had Feist, Ledisi, Paramore, Taylor, and obviously Amy Winehouse, who won. And it's difficult, like, even just looking at that list, like, and thinking about where each of them artists ended up, it's interesting to see. I don't know, I think maybe it would have been a bit too much too soon. That sometimes happens to people. But by the time that 2008 rolls around, Taylor is very much already in the throes and in the midst of preparing Fearless. Would that have changed much? I don't know, but I do think that this nomination definitely gave Taylor a lot of motivation to continue on her trajectory and to trying to hone in her crafts for Fearless, that's for sure. But it's so crazy to see her here with just like Baby R Song and Little Tim McGraw just in the mix. Oh, it's sweet, really.
And I think what's interesting as well is it was obviously at the start of her career, like we've kind of analysed other artists where it's been 10 years into their career or, their first single or whatever. So it's interesting that this was still very early, so therefore might have impacted, what came next. I don't know if it would have, but you never know. It might have made people aware of her then and might have maybe built on her success earlier. No one's to know, but it's still very interesting that Taylor was in the kind of Grammy conscience as well in her debut era. Yeah. It was not Fearless that, turned their heads and made them aware of her. They were clearly very aware of her from the kind of get-go, which I think is also really interesting.
Especially as a country artist through and through, but as we've just seen, this comes after 2007 with Carrie Underwood's win, who was a country artist, so that's also an interesting point to see how the genre was of quite a big importance at the Grammys at that time. Either way, like you said, Amy did win. She very much deserved it. Her legacy is so strong, and it is very tragic what happened. And again, we do not want to trivialize it anyway by saying, curse, no curse, whatever, because in the end, the important thing is she very deservedly won the award, and her legacy after that is very, very strong. Next up, we have 2009, and we have Adele. I mean, how could you even, just saying her name, you can't really say.
The name, it's like Beyonce, isn't it? It's like, no idiot is going to turn around and say
she's
curse, for God's sake. No. Like, that woman is mad. Like, she's won Album of the Year multiple times, ridiculous amount of hits, ridiculous amount of sales. Potentially, her career has kind of like, it still has had ebbs and flows.
Right. It's evolved after 30.
Yeah,
quite
exactly.
A bit.
It definitely, and she's kind of stepping back from like, kind of the celebrity element of the kind of music industry, but you cannot say that Adele has been cursed. She has, even from the kind of 4 albums she's put out, the amount of hits,
everyone knows 1 or 2 songs from all of them. Yeah,
exactly.
It's just as simple as that.
Exactly.
Another very, listen to this lineup. We have Duffy, Jonas Brothers, Lady A, Jasmine Sullivan, and of course Adele, who won, which is what a lineup, to be honest. What a mix.
Yeah, it is. It makes, and also when you do look at those people, Adele has had the most successful career.
Oh yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, definitely.
So following Adele in 2010, the winner was Zac Brown Band, and success after this win has kind of been maybe slightly hit or miss. Again, they've kind of carved out a niche in the country world. Maybe haven't had the kind of mainstream success, but still have a very successful career and following. So again, it's kind of hard with an artist like this that has kind of moved into their niche and is very kind of fruitful within that niche, but maybe isn't in the public conscience. But unfortunately, I think I would probably class them as cursed. How do you feel?
I don't know, just because, do you really hear about them in the public conscience?
No,
right
but
now?
It's weird. It's like I do, but don't.
Yeah, again,
I couldn't name a single song, but I am aware of them as a band.
This is it. We're aware of them, especially because, this is literally our time now. We were young teenagers in the 2010s, more or less. So these are names that we really should still be hearing of, because it's not that long ago, to be honest.
No.
And like you said, I couldn't name more than one, or I couldn't even name.
Well, when you think of what we were saying with like Maroon 5, like
this is it.
10 years after their win, they were still having massive singles. Or
and
John
I
Lennon,
could like
10 years
yeah
after his win, he got status.
Yeah, I could like give you like 2, 3, 4, 5 names of songs, like just recent ones, you know. So again, successful in their niche, but on like in the grand scheme of things, perhaps a little bit cursed to not reach that same or maintain that same like worldwide status, should we say. The same thing happens with 2011's winner, Esperanza Spalding, because firstly, they won against a tough pack. Like the rest of these nominees.
This is probably one of the most stellar kind of like, you know, mass artists that are like massive.
Yeah. So we have Justin Bieber, Drake, Florence and the Machine, and Mumford & Sons. Like those are all such big staple names,
household names. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just like she's almost set up a little bit for failure because of the names that are in that same pack with her. So unfortunately, the first thing you're going to do is look at the rest of the names and be like, I see.
Because even in 2011, Justin Bieber was a very well-established artist.
Oh God, yeah.
Like, you know, he was not a newbie with one single, you know, like he was a household name even in 2011.
Oh yeah, we all had Baby on, you know what I mean? Like we were all
exactly.
These people are also very popular now. Like Justin Bieber is still maybe not so much
massive
recently, but you know, he got some nods for Yummy and things, which is crazy to say, but true. Mm-hmm. Drake has never shut up, so there's that. Florence and the Machine, obviously, Florence is extremely, extremely successful and has a big fandom, a core like cult following as well. And Mumford and Sons, even, isn't that funny? Like, we have all of those people are very much related to Taylor in one way or another.
Which is really weird, yes, for better or for worse.
Yeah, except for the winner, Esperanza Spalding, who did win. Again, her mainstream career paled in comparison, and it was a bit of a controversial win in the day because of the people who she was up against. But I think one thing that we read was that the Grammys kind of like went for artistry over anything else this year. And I'm glad that, you know, she got the recognition.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like they knew the type of competition she was up against. So, like you said, we're kind of choosing to maybe kind of deviate from trying to work out who was going to be the most successful, and instead kind of actually from that lineup maybe pick what they felt was like musically
worthy,
the strongest, or worthy.
Again, you not know, to offend anyone.
Always opinion based.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing with these things. Like even the Grammys, it is opinion based.
Of course,
like,
it is. There's voters.
There is there's so much nuance. So it's hard to kind of, and again, even us going cursed.
Exactly.
Like that's opinion based, you know, but unfortunately, like that is our opinion, and unfortunately, in comparison, especially to the artist she was up against, I believe that this was potentially a curse. And again, been able to carve out a very successful career in her own niche, however, hasn't had really any kind of mainstream success. Next we have 2012, and the winner was Bon Iver. And obviously Bon Iver has had a very successful career and has many kind of Grammy wins and nominations even currently. Has obviously worked with Taylor, has been recently featured on the Brat remix album, and has again had quite an interesting career because he's been able to go into the mainstream but also keep quite a niche alternative.
This is an interesting one, yeah, because it is kind of like what we've been seeing and saying all along, like, well, they're in their niche, but this is a case of not just in the niche, he is a name that people recognize. Because of things like the collaborations that they've been involved in. Like the name is still in people's consciousness because of that. And they've had Grammy nominations over the last few years as well. So because of that, I don't think we can say that they were cursed. However, perhaps at some point or another, they will kind of fade more into their niche. We'll have to see. I don't know. They've always been very indie from the beginning.
That's the thing, it's kind of like it was never really very mainstream, and their kind of music is not, you know, pop radio friendly hits. So in terms of their kind of niche, they're very, very successful. But yeah, it's interesting because like they've also then been able to like have massive success in the pop world with things like XR and, like I said, the Brat Charlie remix album. So it's interesting that they've kind of had quite a successful career in being able to, when they choose to, step into the mainstream while also remaining a very kind of true indie artist.
Next up for 2013, the winner was Fun. And as a band, yeah, they were kind of cursed because this is the only time they actually were recognised together with awards, because soon after that they broke up. However, as individuals, they did have good careers. I mean, obviously we have to speak about Jack Antonoff because you know, he is most relevant to us as a Taylor Swift podcast, he did not suffer from any curse whatsoever.
If anything, this was kind of like the breaking up of the band was probably
good.
You know, probably one of the best things that happened to his career, because he's been able to maintain an incredibly fruitful career, even with things like the Bleachers.
Oh yeah.
Let alone being a producer, and obviously he's won so many awards for not only stuff that he's been involved in, but even just as being recognised as a producer. So yeah, no, he definitely, you cannot say that, but unfortunately as a band, yes, it was a little bit of a curse. It's interesting how bands,
they don't do well.
A lot of the ones we're describing as it's almost like, I don't know if maybe bands are always quite hard, and you know, often bands kind of longevity is often very short.
Well, it's difficult.
Things like One Direction, Little Mix, because you know there's so many different people and so many different opinions, and you know it's harder when it's just, and also there's more, you're spending so much time, there's more time for friction and things like that. Whereas obviously if you're kind of a solo artist, you know, you're kind of doing it on your own. So I don't know if maybe that level of success in a band maybe goes to some people's heads, some people can't cope with it, and then it maybe, I don't know, causes friction. I don't know, it's just interesting that a lot of the people that have been cursed, and not all, but a lot have been bands.
That's such an interesting thing
to kind of note.
That is really an interesting thing to point out. I think that is one of the major threads that does go through this list. That's really, really interesting. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that is one of the, we could add that to the reasonings of why this curse actually exists, because a lot of winners were bands who unfortunately then didn't go on to stay together forever.
So 2014, we have Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. So this is seen as a bit of a misstep by many, and in hindsight, when compared to the other artist from that year, it's a bit like, interesting choice. Because the other competitors were artists like Kendrick Lamar, Casey Musgraves, and Ed Sheeran, all three of which have gone on to have obviously very successful careers. And not long after this win, they obviously broke up, and their second record was kind of okay, but unfortunately did pale in comparison to their debut. Macklemore actually sent Kendrick a message apologising for the rap Grammy win, and unfortunately no one has really heard of them nowadays, so it's kind of a bit of an awkward one. And yeah, I don't really know how to phrase, because at the time they were massive, and they were huge, and they did have a lot of success.
I mean,
but
you could not get away from Thrift Shop in 2014.
Yeah,
everyone knew that song.
All over.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And it did seem like they were about to have a very fruitful career. And again, obviously they're not a kind of band in the traditional sense, but obviously it is kind of two of them.
Right.
So potentially, again, they might have fallen into the kind of band curse. But it's just interesting when you look at names like Ed Sheeran, Kendrick Lamar, Casey Musgraves, you know, like people that have had massive Grammy success, and then also just success generally in terms of album sales and, you know, tours and recognition. So yeah, interesting one. And this one, I remember at the time, even this one was a bit of a kind of contentious one, because everyone was like, what? Because even Thrift Shop at the time, as much as it was unavoidable, it was a little bit of a joke.
Of course it was. And even like the lyrics themselves, it is a joke. It's supposed to be a joke. It's not supposed to be taken like seriously.
Exactly. But then at the same time, it's kind of like, oh, so you're kind of giving it to like a bit of a joke artist. So it was, very contentious.
No, especially their wins in rap categories was very contentious, because Kendrick Lamar was very much snubbed back then, and we hate to see that. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah, the fact they had to apologise, I always find that very awkward when there's kind of apologies from artists, and obviously Adele has done it before, and even Billie Eilish, and it does always feel a little bit, I always wonder what the Grammys think, whether they're like, you know, like,
I know,
we've awarded you for a reason or something.
Yeah.
And it is always very awkward, and it does kind of feed into a lot of kind of opinions about the Grammys, and, you know, who's deserving and who's not. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's definitely very interesting.
In 2015, we have Sam Smith, and their earlier work from that time was so much more lauded than later efforts from them. So in 2015, they won for Best New Artist, Best Pop Vocal Album, Record of the Year, and Song of the Year. So it was a big year for them. However, then we don't have any other Grammy nominations until 2023 with Unholy. However, they won for Unholy for Best Pop Duo / Group Performance. So it seemed like a career with a lot of ebb and flow to it, but we can't really say that they were cursed, because they have managed to like bring it back around.
Yeah, and they're still very much in the public conscience, and have had big hits with, you know, being featured on the James Bond soundtrack and winning an Oscar for that. Then also even things like Dancing with a Stranger with Normani was a big old hit a couple of years ago. I think that unfortunately their kind of previous their albums past The Lonely Hour haven't maybe reach the same level of success, but again, they're still quite early on in their career. You know, they're only really like 3 albums deep, which, you know, is kind of nothing really. So it's hard to kind of say, but I guess potentially not cursed. I think that they probably have had quite a fruitful and successful career so far. Potentially, you know, that might tail off again. It might kind of rise up again. I think it's hard to say. It's very, very hard to say.
Yeah, also as we go on throughout the years, it becomes more and more difficult to tell because of how recent these are. Like when we get to the end of 2019, 2020, we have to kind of stop looking too far forward because it's very difficult to say, because this is kind of like going into the case of people who may be doing really well now, but who's to say in another 10 years time.
So next in 2016 we have Meghan Trainor, and obviously her debut album was very divisive, but those songs were everywhere. Every single from that album was a smash, and her reviews have always been rather mixed throughout her career, and at times she has maybe faded slightly into the background, but her latest releases have done quite well on TikTok, but maybe have kind of debuted quite low on Billboard. However, more recently, Made You Look did reach number 11, and she did release an album this year. Maybe hasn't made massive waves, however, again, I think has kind of built out quite a core fan base, and because of a catalogue of hits from her debut album and kind of subsequent early albums, has always got interest in fan base and has been able to carve out a very successful career on TikTok. So it's again quite hard, but in terms of her initial success, I do think that maybe Meghan Trainor is probably deemed a curse. What would you think?
I think a lot of people, when they think of the Grammy Curse, do think of Meghan Trainor just because of how high that peak was in 2015, 2016, from being heard everywhere to kind of like disappearing for quite a while, then coming back. But for me, you know this, between you and I, you know that I'm not the biggest fan of Meghan Trainor, so I'm not going to be able to be completely objective, to be honest. Like, whenever she releases new things, I do feel like it's all very samey same. I do think it's like trying to grasp onto that idea of
that success,
what she once did. And it's like that type of music has had its day a long time ago.
Yeah, I think there's not really been like an artistic
transformation.
Like there's been no kind of like, she hasn't like kind of artistically evolved. It's still very much pumping out those same kind of like similar sounding songs, and you know, there's a market clearly for that because she still has a very kind of solid fan base, and like I said, is pretty successful. When I went to Ossett Capital Summertime Ball this year, and them 14-year-olds were going mad for her. And I was like, you guys were clearly not around when I was around, because, you know, she was never cool.
No, this is it.
But yeah, no, it's interesting. And again, you know, she's still been able to pump out music, so clearly it's still having some success somewhere. But yeah, I think in comparison to that debut album, Title, I believe it was called, she hasn't really had that massive success.
Next up for 2017, we have Chance the Rapper, and his success has waned quite a bit since. For example, he hasn't been up for any more Grammys since then. However, like I said, it's difficult to tell because 2017 does feel like a bit of a long time ago, but at the same time, not really. Some people take quite a few years to produce, you know, like new chart-topping hits. Either way, he did win with Colouring Book, Best Rap Album at the Grammys in 2017, himself as Best New Artist, and No Problem as Best Rap Performance. Since then, we haven't really heard too much from him as for nominations and awards, so I don't know, a bit of a curse.
He's interesting because, again, I think he has a very, very, very
loyal core
fan base, loyal fan base, and is like massive on things like SoundCloud.
Right, yeah.
So I think again, he's quite a tough one because, again, he's probably, and you know, rap and kind of R&B and hip hop, anything like that is not really my world personally. I'm more in the kind of pop country, so it might be that he maybe hasn't permetrated into that world, but is still having massive success in his own. So it's kind of hard to comment, and like you said, it's only 2017, that's really not that long ago, so it's hard to kind of judge. But I think, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking Curse, simply because we haven't heard much from like big awards since, or like big mainstream events, when in 2017 he did become like quite a known rapper and artist, and after that kind of like disappeared, but like you said, has a very big core following. I know that he's also been embroiled in some, let's say, controversial opinions, so that doesn't help the image that he made for himself over the last few years. Either way, I guess we'd have to wait and see a few like we said with all of these, I think we have to wait and see a few years to see if there's a comeback. But for now, I'm thinking a little bit of a curse going on here.
So 2018, we have Alicia Cara, and unfortunately her career did peak this year. I remember at the time, again, massive. She had a couple of singles around that time that were huge, but unfortunately hasn't really been able to maintain that level of success. I believe she's still kind of, floating around, but I think unfortunately, in comparison to other artists that we've kind of mentioned, like, Adele, her career, unfortunately, I believe, has been kind of cursed since winning this award.
Again, it's sad because back in 2018, she was like, again, everywhere, collaborations, that's it. And then little by little, she's kind of, again, she probably has her fans who are very much ride or die. I didn't even realize that she is releasing an album in February next year. So I figured that out just now, you know what I mean? So it's not like she is in the public consciousness or in the forefront of our minds, and especially compared to the next winner we're going to talk about, I do think there's a bit of a curse going on in comparison. Again, it's hard to tell with these last ones because of how recent it is really and how much has gone on in those last years. Because you've got to consider 2020, 2021 were difficult years for music because a lot of people stopped or held back their music or decided to scrap projects because of everything that was going on. So this may not be the case, but I have to say I'm thinking cursed.
Yeah, I agree.
For 2019, we have Dua Lipa, and I think for now, this is the last one that we can really classify with certainty because it isn't too long ago, but at the same time it is pretty recent. Since then, Future Nostalgia was a massive pop era. Her current era, Radical Optimism, seems to be struggling to match that success.
A little bit, yeah.
But at the same time, people still absolutely adore her. She is a massive household name. People now, very much know of her. She's about to embark on a massive 2025 tour and has sold out 2 nights at Wembley Stadium. So we can't say that she's faded into oblivion because right now she very much hasn't. People still know her singles. You can hear her on the radio. She's still in people's consciousness.
Yeah, Dua's massive. Yeah, Dua is still absolutely massive. And like we've said with other artists, kind of their careers do ebb and flow, and she's still very, very early on into her career. And like you said, things like Future Nostalgia and even things off Radical Optimism, she still had massive success with that. Maybe not to the massive level that Future Nostalgia had, but yeah, I think it would be silly to categorize her as a curse when, she's definitely not. But what I think is interesting is out of the last 10 years, really, there's only really been 2 artists that we have kind of deemed non-cursed, which is obviously Sam Smith and Dua Lipa, whereas it seems like potentially in comparison to the early 2000s where we were saying that, and this might be because obviously they've got a longer career to analyse.
Yeah.
But the kind of mid-2000s, it seemed like the Grammys were really on it with picking, and maybe in the last, 10 years or the pre-2020s were kind of maybe struggling to pick and maybe, kind of stepped a little.
It's a bit of a mixed bag, all in all, really, isn't it? But I think that those last ones are a little bit hard to judge at the moment.
And also I think they were definitely picking the artist that, had the massive single of the year.
Which doesn't mean that you're going to become the artist for all time.
Exactly. Whereas, maybe potentially previous years there were artists that were potentially a little more established. It's harder to judge. But yeah, it's interesting how it does seem like there might be some kind of backing in this supposed curse.
However, then we move on to this decade's winners, which are much harder to judge because, as we've said, there's very little time that has passed, which gives them little time to really prove themselves to have beaten the curse or succumb to it. Not really enough time to cement a legacy. However, it's looking pretty positive for basically all of them currently. Only time will tell, but maybe this means the curse is over. Who knows? So those last few years, in 2020, Billie Eilish won, 2021, Megan Thee Stallion, 2022, Olivia Rodrigo, 2023, Samara Joy, and 2024, the most recent winner at the moment was Victoria Monet. All women in music. We love to see it.
Yes, and Billie Eilish, Olivia Rodrigo, like, you know, they're massive, and especially Billie, like, even since 2020 has had massive success, and has currently got a single that is just going mega viral. So yeah, it would be silly to deem her or Olivia, but again, they are still very early on in their career, but they still have had massive success since winning that award. So yeah, it's kind of hard to judge. So before we jump into 2025's nominees, we thought it'd be good to kind of round off all our opinions while obviously analysing the curse, where it started in the 80s, 90s, and then obviously 2000s and 2020s, whether we think it has any credibility, where we think it's coming from, if it's true, if it's not. So I guess my personal opinion, I do think there is some potential credibility behind the fact that some of the artists that are being awarded for Best New Artist are not having the levels of success that they're having when they were nominated. But do I think that it's because of winning that award, because that award is cursed? No. I think that similar to the sophomore slump, it's that by winning that award, you're putting so much pressure on that artist to maintain that level of success that unfortunately they're never really, it's very hard to live up to. And lots of artists, you know, there's so many artists that never win that award that have massive success at the start of their career and maybe don't towards the latter end of their career, but aren't being brought up as, oh, you're cursed.
Exactly.
Because naturally that's kind of what happens to careers. So I think it's more that it's a massive honour, puts a massive spotlight on them, and then therefore because of that sometimes they struggle to maintain that success and maybe struggle with that level of success. How do you feel about it?
I completely agree. It's an amazing honour to have, but in a way it also puts you under a microscope. Like, we aren't analysing, we did it for a couple of nominees, but only in comparison to whoever won, and we aren't analysing every single person who was around at that time and saying, well, they did this, they did that, they did the other, because some people, you know, do have fame and notoriety for that point in their career, and then just like anything else in life, things move on, and that's absolutely fine as well. But unfortunately, we are holding these people up to the highest of standards and saying, you know, they aren't still around, so cursed, which is a bit unfair of us. But it's also unfair that the Grammys, you know, do have this attached to them, because it does so much is put upon their shoulders at such young ages sometimes. And even when they're the established ones, that puts even more pressure onto them, because it's like, well, you've already got the experience, so you can't use age as an excuse. And you've already, you know, got the spotlight on you. So now, you know, dance, make sure it stays on you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
and I think what is interesting with it is that obviously during the 1990s especially, the Grammys kind of lost quite a lot of credibility with this award. And I think that in years since have really worked hard, I think, to try, especially in the last couple of years with things like Olivia Rodrigo, Billie Eilish, Dua Lipa, to try and win back some of that credibility and beat this supposed curse, and maybe not just picking and jumping on the person that's had the biggest song of the year, or, you know, like a big breakout single. Right. I feel like they're trying to pick people that clearly have kind of an artistic involvement in their music, clearly very kind of involved in their career and a very clear artistic kind of vision. So it's interesting how I think that potentially they've kind of shifted their focus from maybe, you know, things like Alicia Cara, Chance the Rapper, Meghan Trainor, Macklemore were maybe just like the big song of, or even Fun were just the big song of the year, and therefore they're thinking, oh yeah, that's the best new artist because that's the best newest artist in the charts right now. So it's interesting how potentially they're trying to work back some credibility, kind of debunk the curse, I guess. I guess
so. In the end, it is kind of like we are obsessed morbidly with seeing people crash and burn. That is something that people are interested in. And that's why I think these curse episodes do spark controversy, conversation, and people are interested in them because of that. We like to see a downfall sometimes, which is terribly sad, but it is also captivating. It really is. So I understand that and I get that. At the same time, I do agree with you. I think that maybe things are turning around. However, it's very too soon to tell. I do think so, because who knows where we're going to be. It's very difficult to tell the future and tell where someone's career is going to be. And I think another thing, and this ties into our other episode with curses, the fourth album Curse, I think it all really depends on how that artist not only decides to focus their career, but are they brave enough to evolve with the music industry or set the standards of new things in the music industry. And that is why Taylor has so much longevity. She has been able to, from 2006 when she was nominated for the first time right until now, she is always in people's consciousness and minds, and has only, each time you think she's peaked, she re-peaks again, which is such an incredible thing to do after almost 20 years in the music industry. Like, compare her to some of her peers and it's absolutely incredible because she always evolves with time and is not scared to try new things and is not scared to put herself out there.
And artistry and creativity has been something that have kind of been at the forefront of her career, and maybe unlike other artists that because they've seen success with something they've put out, trying to recreate that success because they think, well, that's successful, so I'll recreate that. Taylor's done the opposite. She's thought, okay, what can I do that's totally different from literally what I've just put out? So it is very interesting, and I think what's also interesting is how, you know, we're talking about the Best New Artist Grammy Curse, but we don't talk about other Grammy Awards that have curses, because who would ever say, oh, Song of the Year's got a curse, or, you know, Album of the Year's got a curse, because it doesn't, because that's a massive, massive achievement, and if anything, it then, you know, propels that artist, you know, like artists like Casey Musgraves with winning gold now, that kind of propelled her career and put that album and her kind of at the forefront of a lot of
and it's
minds.
sad. We should think the same way. We should think the same way for these poor people who we're suddenly naming
this is a massive
curse.
opportunity.
Yeah,
not something that they should almost be slightly terrified about winning, because they're going to have to now prove themselves.
And again, we've called some of these people cursed, but that does not, we don't want to offend anyone with that. And moreover, a lot of them, like we have said throughout, have been able to establish their own fandoms, their own niches, and have gone on to have just long careers that perhaps aren't in the limelight. And you know what? To some extent, maybe that was best for them. And that's better, you know, just in terms of how fame is so fickle, that's probably a pretty good career you've got on your hands.
Healthier, exactly. And also, as we've kind of, you know, we started the episode with, and we'll kind of bookend the episode with as well, is that obviously music is opinion-based.
Oh, yeah.
There is no right or wrong. All of the stuff that we have said has been opinion-based, and even stuff that we've referenced is also still opinion-based, because at the end of the day, you can't really judge.
It's not like a specific science.
Someone's cursed.
Yeah.
While discussing that, it's also worth mentioning this year's upcoming nominees, so the 2025 Best New Artist nominees, because this year seems to be full of some heavy hitters and very, very tough competition. So I'll quickly run through them and then we'll kind of give our thoughts. So starting off, we have Benson Boone, Sabrina Carpenter, Dolce, Khruangbin, RAYE, Chappell Roan, Shabuzi, and Teddy Swims. So as I said, a hefty old lineup. And as we started the episode with mentioning about how some of these artists, like especially people like Sabrina Carpenter and even Chappell Roan, have been around, you know, way longer than this year and have been building a career. However, this year have definitely broke the public conscience. Even artists like RAYE, she's been around for years and years and years, but this year with the success of kind of going independent, has kind of become absolutely massive. So I guess first off, before we get into anything about curses, who do we think will win / who do we kind of want to win? What are you thinking?
Oh, it's a difficult one. It's a tough pack, isn't it?
Because is it, if it is cursed, we then cursing that?
Oh my gosh, no, that's the thing. No, we don't want to curse anyone, and I really don't think that it is. All in all, I really don't think that it is a real thing. I think that some people, you know, like we said, it's just like a unlucky label, but I don't think people should take it too seriously. It's absolutely fine. However, if that works as a consolation prize, if you lose, that's fine as well. You can think that and be like, okay, never mind. Listen, we are a Taylor Swift podcast, and we know that there is one person in this list that we are more likely to lean towards. So I am...
And also, I am also a massive fan of that person.
Exactly.
As well, so.
I am here for Sabrina Carpenter to win. She has had such an incredible year of music. I think she deserves. But there's a lot of other names here that I wouldn't, you know, be sad about if they won. Not at all.
RAYE.
Yeah,
Chappell. Yeah, no, definitely. I think, yeah, especially from Sabrina, RAYE, and Chappell, I think are all very, very deserving of having massive years for music. And like you said, Sabrina's had like a massive, massive year, but I'm really hoping that she kind of wins in some of the big categories as well. So we'll see. So I really wouldn't mind for someone like RAYE. I think whenever she kind of is given her flowers, I always feel really kind of like, you can see that it really, really means a lot to her. And I think, you know, she really took a risk by going independent and kind of breaking away from a very toxic kind of label and cycle of being made to make music that she didn't really want to have to make. And I'm really glad that people have kind of supported her and kind of championed her. So again, if this is another way to do that, I would love for that. Chappell Roan, even people like Teddy Swims have had a massive year, Benson Boone. So yeah, I think it's a really, really solid lineup this year, and very, very well thought out. So I guess we'll see who wins. We'll then, in a couple of years, be able to see how their career is going and potentially if this supposed curse applies to them. Hopefully not. But yeah, we have now come to the end of this episode. Let us know your thoughts. If you think the curse is real, if you think there's some of the things you mentioned, some of the artists actually have gone on to have very successful careers in other ways and maybe you're a fan of, please let us know. We love hearing all about all sorts of different musical kind of spheres and genres. But if you did enjoy this episode, make sure to give it a like, and if you're not yet subscribed, also subscribe over on YouTube. If you're listening over on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere where you can listen to podcasts, we also love it if you would rate us. And if you are interested in keeping up to date with all things Swiftly Spoken, then make sure to follow us on Instagram as well. And as we said, if you're interested in any other kind of musical theories or supposed curses, then make sure to check out our Sophomore Slump episode and 4th album Curse. But until next time, we will speak soon.